Canadian companies are in fierce competition, of course, to drum up new business around the world. The traditional markets of the U.S. and Europe are in economic trouble nowadays. So in the search for new markets further afield, talk is turning more and more to Africa on energy, water and infrastructure projects. Tim Turner is with the African Development Bank based in Tunis. He was recently part of a forum in Montreal on development opportunities in Africa called Forum Africa 2011. A lot of untapped potential in this continent. You've been there for many years. You know it firsthand.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting when you look at Africa, the potential there in terms of the mineral resources. Canadians already know that. You've got Canadian mining companies all over the continent. But it's also an opportunity in so many other ways. The opportunities for solar energy. You've got the whole Sahara Desert area. Opportunities for hydroelectric power. In fact, the potential for the world's largest hydroelectric station in the DRC exists in Africa. The potential for agriculture. We understand that an estimated 60% of the world's unused arable land is in Africa. So when we talk about food security, Africa is going to have to play a very important role in that.
You're with the African Development Bank, and explain to the folks at home what exactly that means. What do you guys do?
Well, the African Development Bank, that is, its fundamental role is about alleviating poverty. Now, the way we go about that is through promoting the development of economic growth, sustainable and inclusive economic growth. The modus operandi for us is really to support the private sector, because that's where the engine of growth will be, through enablers. Many of those enablers are physical infrastructure, so we're very active in developing power projects, transportation projects, telecommunication projects. But we also work on the soft side, you know, working with governments for the regulatory frameworks, the legal frameworks, all the software that is required to facilitate the development of the private sector and doing business.
When you talk about Africa being open for business, you know, a lot of folks, when they think of Africa, they think about the political unrest that's going on. And I think it's important to mention that it's not sort of one monolith. I mean, there are certain countries where, I mean, you're in Tunisia, where, of course, there was a revolution earlier this year in North Africa, other pockets in Zimbabwe and other countries, but there are a lot of countries that are stable and democratic and open for business.
Yeah. Well, you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, many people from the outside see Africa as this monolith. In fact, it's 53 or 54 countries with a wide spectrum. Some, of course, there are problem areas, and the savvy investor knows where to avoid. But there are parts of Africa where the reforms that have been going on, and take the example of Rwanda, absolutely remarkable changes, and that in itself is creating opportunities for doing good business, sustainable business. And I think what we see is that Canadian companies are actually pretty savvy in understanding where the places to invest, the sectors to invest. And part of our role is to help guide them. We act as a partner with them to make sure that, you know, they're making sound decisions. Working with an institution like the African Development Bank can be a very intrusive thing, because we want to really understand the nature of the projects to make sure that from a comprehensive perspective, all stakeholders are getting a fair deal.
And you want transparency as well.
Absolutely. Transparency, the environmental standards, the governance standards, zero tolerance for corruption. Those are the things that the African Development Bank has in terms of values.
What's the perception in Africa about Canadian companies? Curious.
I think generally very good. You know, Canadian companies are known to have values, corporate values, that strike very closely along the lines of the values of institutions like ourselves. Canada, also being a bilingual country, has had a natural in Africa. I think through the francophonie, you know, you see there's a very natural fit in there. Canadians are seen as businessmen that want to do business, but fair business, not too pushy, but very competent. Of course, we've got our areas of expertise, the mining sector I mentioned, but you've got the large engineering companies, the Acons, the SNC Lavalins, the others that are doing fantastic work and are willing to go overseas and share that expertise.
Tim Turner, is at the African Development Bank. I want to thank you very much for coming in today.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.